It was a cold winter evening when a billionaire stepped out of his sleek black car, ready to savor a hot meal at an upscale restaurant. As the waiter brought a steaming bowl of soup to his table, a frail voice shattered the moment. "Don't eat that!" The shout came from a scruffy, shivering boy standing outside the restaurant window. His face was pale, his clothes tattered, but his voice carried a desperation that froze everyone in their tracks. The billionaire locked eyes with the boy, confused and irritated. "What on earth is this kid talking about?" he muttered. But then, the boy's next words made his heart pound. "It's poisoned." The entire restaurant fell silent, every pair of eyes darting between the boy and the billionaire, and that's when the unimaginable began to unravel. Before we jump into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love powerful stories of justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's get started. The boy's name was Liam, but to most people he was just the homeless kid who roamed the streets of the city. At only 12 years old, life had already dealt him a brutal hand. His clothes hung loose on his thin frame, and his unkempt hair framed eyes that had seen far too much for his age. Liam wasn't like other kids. He didn't beg for money or food. Instead, he watched, listened, and remembered. Every corner of the city, every alley, every face, he knew them all. Some called him a street rat, but those who paid closer attention noticed something extraordinary about him. Liam had an uncanny ability to sense danger before it struck. That night, as he stood outside the restaurant, shivering against the biting cold, his sharp eyes caught something no one else did. What he saw in the billionaire's steaming bowl of soup made his heart race. He had seconds to act. If he was wrong, he'd be humiliated. If he was right, it could change everything. Liam didn't hesitate. "Don't eat that," he shouted again, louder this time. But it wasn't just the shout that caught the billionaire's attention. It was the fear in Liam's voice that sent a chill down his spine. The restaurant erupted in chaos. Patrons turned to stare, whispering among themselves. The billionaire, Mr. Grant Whitmore, was not a man accustomed to being interrupted, let alone by a ragged boy from the streets. He stood up slowly, his piercing gaze fixed on Liam. "What kind of game are you playing, boy?" Grant's voice was cold, carrying the weight of power and authority. Liam's breath came in quick bursts, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm not lying. There's something in that soup. You can't eat it," he pleaded, his voice trembling but insistent. A waiter rushed over, glaring at Liam. "You've got no business here. Get out before I call the police." The staff, eager to please their wealthy patron, grabbed Liam by the arm, ready to drag him out. "No, wait," Liam protested, struggling against their grip. "You don't understand. Someone's trying to hurt him." The crowd sneered. A child from the streets, trying to play the hero? It was laughable to them. "Let him go," Grant finally said, his voice cutting through the commotion like a knife. The staff hesitated but obeyed, releasing Liam, who stumbled forward. Liam's eyes darted around the room, searching for proof, for anything that could back up his desperate claim. But he had nothing, just his word. And in a world that judged him by his dirty clothes and empty pockets, his word meant nothing. Grant folded his arms, towering over the boy. "If you're lying, I'll make sure you regret wasting my time," he said, his tone a mix of warning and skepticism. Liam swallowed hard, knowing the weight of the risk he was taking. He glanced back at the bowl, his voice steady despite the fear creeping in. "I'm not lying," Liam said, his eyes locking with Grant's. "But if you don't believe me, then go ahead. Eat it." Grant paused, spoon hovering over the bowl, the boy's words lingering in his mind. There was something unsettling in Liam's tone, a certainty that couldn't be ignored. The crowd watched with bated breath, some amused, others annoyed, but Liam wasn't focused on them. His eyes stayed on Grant, unwavering. "I've seen this before," Liam said, his voice softer now but still firm. "A man ate something just like that, and he didn't make it. I couldn't stop him in time. but I won't let it happen again." Grant raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched across his face. "You're telling me you're some kind of poison expert?" His tone dripped with disbelief, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his hand. Liam hesitated, his throat tightening. He didn't want to explain, didn't want to relive the memories he worked so hard to bury. But if it meant saving this man, he had no choice. "I wasn't always on the streets," Liam began, his voice trembling slightly. "My mom, she was a chemist, a brilliant one. She taught me things most people don't know. How to recognize poisons, how they smell, how they look. His voice cracked, but he pushed through. "She died because of one, and ever since, I've been able to spot them." Grant's eyes narrowed, studying the boy with a mix of doubt and curiosity. The room had fallen silent, the laughter and whispers replaced by an uneasy tension. "Look," Liam continued, his voice growing firmer, "I don't care if you believe me or not, but I'm telling you, there's something in that soup. If you eat it, you're taking a risk you don't want to take." Grant glanced at the bowl, then back at Liam. For the first time, there was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. The boy's words carried a weight, a truth that gnawed at his instincts. "Fine," Grant said, his voice low but steady. "If you're so sure, prove it. Tell me exactly what's wrong with it." Liam stepped closer, the tension in the room so thick it was almost suffocating. His next words would change everything. Liam took a deep breath, his small hands trembling as he pointed to the bowl. "It's in the broth," he said, his voice firm despite the tension in the room. "Look closely at the surface. See that faint shimmer? It's not oil. It's something else." Grant leaned in, his expression unreadable, but there was a trace of doubt in his eyes. The waiter, visibly irritated, scoffed. "That's ridiculous. It's just herbs and seasoning. This boy's making it up." But Liam wasn't backing down. "I've seen it before," he said, his gaze locked on Grant. "It's subtle, but it's there. Something's been added to it, and I'll prove it. Just let me test it." "Test it?" Grant echoed, his tone skeptical. "With what? Your instincts?" Liam hesitated for a split second, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial of clear liquid. The crowd gasped, and someone muttered, "Where does a street kid get something like that?" "It's a reagent," Liam explained, holding it up. "Something my mom taught me to make. If there's poison in the soup, this will change color when it reacts." Grant studied the boy for a moment, then gave a curt nod. "Go ahead, but if you're wrong—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Liam stepped forward, his heart pounding as he carefully poured a single drop of the reagent into the soup. For a moment, nothing happened, and the room seemed to collectively hold its breath. Then, the liquid in the bowl turned a sickly shade of green. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispers, and the sound of chairs scraping against the floor filled the air. Grant's face hardened, and he turned to the waiter. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. The waiter stammered, his face pale. I don't know, sir. There must be some mistake." But Liam wasn't done. "It's not a mistake," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Someone wanted you dead, Mr. Whitmore, and this was their plan." Grant's gaze flickered between Liam and the waiter, suspicion brewing in his mind. "Who?" he asked, his tone low and dangerous. "Who would do this?" Liam's eyes scanned the room, his mind racing. He didn't have the answer yet, but he could feel it, like a puzzle with pieces just waiting to fall into place. "I don't know," Liam admitted, his voice steady, "but I can find out. If you trust me." Grant's jaw tightened, and for a moment the room was silent. Then he gave a single nod. "Fine, let's find out who's behind this." The investigation had begun, and the stakes had never been higher. Liam's heart raced as he pieced the clues together. Over the next few tense hours, he combed through every detail: the suspicious waiter's movements, the restaurant security footage, and the faint scent of something unusual lingering in the air. Grant had pulled strings to keep the restaurant open after hours, turning the upscale dining hall into an interrogation ground. Liam finally spotted it, a faint trace of powder on the edge of the soup pot. He sniffed it, his sharp instincts kicking in. "It's aconitine," he said, his voice trembling with urgency. "A deadly plant toxin. Someone mixed it into the broth, but only in your bowl, Mr. Whitmore." Grant's eyes darkened, his expression unreadable. "And who would have access to my food?" he asked, his voice heavy with suspicion. Liam's gaze darted toward the waiter, who had been acting jittery since the discovery. "Him," Liam said, pointing directly at the man. The waiter froze, his face draining of color. That's ridiculous," he stammered. "Why would I do something like that?" Liam stepped closer, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Because someone paid you to," he said. "You've been nervous all night. And when Mr. Whitmore questioned you, you couldn't even look him in the eye." The room went silent as everyone turned toward the waiter, whose trembling hands gave him away. Grant stepped forward, towering over the man. "Who sent you?" he demanded, his voice like a thunderclap. The waiter crumbled under the pressure, his facade cracking. It was Mr. Donovan," he finally admitted, barely above a whisper. Grant's expression shifted, a mix of rage and realization. "Donovan," he muttered. "My business rival. He'd stop at nothing to see me out of the picture." But Liam wasn't done. "He didn't just stop at hiring someone to poison you," he said. "Look at this." He held up a slip of paper he'd found tucked in the waiter's apron, a handwritten note detailing Grant's usual order and the timing of his reservation. The room erupted in whispers as Grant's face hardened. "Call the police," he ordered. As the waiter was escorted out in handcuffs, Grant turned to Liam, his expression softening for the first time. "You saved my life," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. But Liam wasn't looking for praise. "I just did what I had to," he replied. "People like Donovan think they can get away with anything because no one's watching. But they're wrong. Someone's always watching." Grant studied Liam for a moment, then nodded. "And sometimes, it's the person no one expects." The police investigation confirmed everything Liam had uncovered. Donovan's plot to eliminate Grant was as ruthless as it was calculated, but thanks to Liam's sharp instincts and courage, it had failed. The news spread quickly, and the boy who had been dismissed as just a homeless kid became a citywide hero overnight. Grant, deeply moved by Liam's actions, didn't let the moment pass. The next morning, he sought out the boy, finding him sitting on a bench with the same weary look he had when they first met. "You changed my life last night, Liam," Grant said, his voice steady but kind. "And I don't just mean saving it." Liam looked up, surprised. "I didn't do it for anything," he said simply. "I just couldn't stand there and let it happen." Grant smiled, sitting beside him. "That's exactly why you deserve more than this," he replied, gesturing to Liam's surroundings. "You have a gift, a sharp mind, a good heart. You deserve a chance to use it in a better place." Liam's eyes widened as Grant handed him an envelope. Inside was a scholarship to one of the best schools in the city, along with a promise to help him get off the streets. Tears welled in Liam's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away. "Why would you do this for me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because you taught me something," Grant replied. "It's not the suit, the car, or the money that defines someone's worth. It's their actions, their integrity, their courage. You reminded me of that when I needed it most." Liam looked down at the envelope, his fingers trembling. For the first time in years, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. As Grant walked away, he turned back and added, "Oh, and one more thing. Never stop being the person who speaks up when it matters. The world needs more people like you." Liam watched him leave, a small smile tugging at his lips. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like it was his to shape. No matter how small or overlooked you may feel, your actions can change lives. Integrity and courage aren't bound by wealth or status. They're defined by what you do when it matters most. Even in the darkest corners, light can shine from the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching. Maya's story reminds us that standing up for what's right can create lasting change. Whether it's overcoming adversity or challenging injustice, your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts on the story. Let's keep this conversation going. And remember, sharing these stories helps spread the message of justice and fairness, one act of courage at a time. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.